So, Joshua, thank you for joining in this conversation series that I've been doing on The Future is Calling Us to Greatness.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Good to see you again.
Great to see you again, too, brother. So, I'd love to hear just from your heart, just help people who don't know who Joshua Gorman is, even before you get into talking about Generation Waking Up. Just give a sense of your story, your trajectory, how you got to where you are, like what you're particularly passionate about or known for, that sort of thing. Help our viewers and listeners get to know who you are.
Okay. Well, I am a child of the 21st century and really came of age as we were making the turn from the 20th to the 21st. And to really know me, you have to understand that I grew up in the madness of these times. I grew up as a young person in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in a very diverse, multicultural, global community. Um, and as I came of age, I found myself just like deeply troubled by our times, deeply disturbed by the state of our world. I grew up Christian. My best friend was Muslim, and we both lost our religions together. So I'm a young person who was given a story that didn't speak to me, didn't speak to the truth of my soul as I was kind of awakening. And so I became a young person without a story. And for me, that was a very traumatic experience because I really believe human beings need a story to hold them and to give their life meaning. And so for years, I was a lost and troubled young person, and I wandered and I traveled, and I struggled to find my way. And I went through a pretty deep existential life crisis, a dark night of the soul, and I was one of the lucky ones, one of the young people who, I didn't end up taking my life. I didn't end up lost to substance abuse like some of my friends, and I found my way into communities of healing and transformation. I ended up on the islands of Hawaii. And it was there that I suddenly got turned on to the upside of our times. For so long, I was just kind of caught up in the downside, and I was so attuned to how things are falling apart and the suffering. But in Hawaii, I suddenly got turned on to all of the creative growth and all the opportunity that's just like radically opening up in our times. And I got exposed to movements of social change. I got turned on to the conscious evolution movement, folks who really recognize that we right now as a human species are going through a major shift. And we're kind of awakening to our oneness as a human species, and we're kind of stepping into a deeper creation story. And it was in Hawaii that I got turned on to what's called the great story or the new story or the universe story. And that fundamentally changed my life. It suddenly rooted me into a deeper flow of purpose and meaning. At the deepest level, it just made sense. And I finally felt a sense of being at home in the universe. I finally had found some peace
Amen.
Within. And at that time, I got really fired up, and I was like, all right, well, we're here to do something. You know, my generation is like, we're born at this critical make it or break it moment. And I knew that I had to be part of the positive forces of life that are playing out in our times, working towards creating a thriving, just, and sustainable world. So, that's really who I am today. That's what shaped me. That's the defining story of my life.
That's awesome, Joshua. Well, obviously, you can imagine. In fact, you don't even have to imagine because you know me well enough to know that I'm amening as you're speaking because some of the same mentors and some of the same people and movements have been so deeply nourishing to me and to Connie and to our life. And just as a disclosure to those who are watching and listening, when my book, Thank God for Evolution, came out several years ago, I worked closely with Joshua, and Joshua supported us in our ministry in getting the word out. And we've spoken. We've both been on the platform together at various events, and so I think the world of Joshua and his work. So I just want to just mention that at this point now. Joshua, one of the things that obviously that you and I hold in common is this deep grounding and appreciation for, as Connie and I call it, the great story or the epic of evolution, what's now being called big history. In fact, just an aside, just this morning, I uploaded to YouTube a 5-part series called God in Big History. It's not even available. I haven't told anybody else about it. You're the first person that's heard about it. Because the International Big History Conference is happening. We're talking in early July, and exactly a month from now is that conference. And so I'm just really excited about that. But I'd love to have you go just a little bit more into what is it about the work of people like Joanna Macy and Thomas Berry and Brian Swim and this whole sacred understanding of evolution that we are part of, that process. What are some of the things about that story that either inspire you or give you hope in challenging times? Where has the nourishment for you been in this epic of evolution?
Yeah. I needed a story that made sense at the deepest level. The creation story I grew up with came out of Christianity, and it's a beautiful story, but it felt fictitious, like a fairy tale, right? And the deep wisdom in me just knew there's something deeper. There's a deeper understanding of life. And I think for me, the epic of evolution, it's a creation story that just makes sense to me at the deepest level. It's such a beautiful story. I mean, it's so elegant. The design of life, the way that life has truly created us, and not a fictitious God snapping their finger and suddenly, bam, you have creation, but this mysterious process that, has just sprung to life, flowered forth. So there's something I needed that deeper understanding. But I think most importantly, what it helped me too is that it helped me realize that life is about the journey and not just the destination. And it helped give a context to the times we're alive in, because where before I thought we were just living in the end times, and I thought this was the worst time ever to be born into, right? It's like, why did I have to be born at this time? Why couldn't I have been born back in, that age or that era? I suddenly realized that, wow, there's a story unfolding, and this is just one great chapter of many. And actually, there's this huge drama playing out on the world stage today, and we all get to be protagonists in that story. And so it gave me, when I go back to that all the time, like when I'm suffering, when I see such struggle, and it seems like we're not going to make it, I go back to that larger context. And I hear that voice in my head, Gene Houston. I often hear Gene's voice as well. It's like the show must go on.
Yes.
A journey like this continues to unfold, and yes, there are hard times and good times, and yet the story goes on, and that's all part of the purpose. There is a larger purpose. Then, of course, Dr. King's famous line, right? The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Like that also really, I think, is deeply aligned with the understanding of the epic of evolution.
Yeah, that's great, Joshua. One of the things I was reminded as you were speaking is a quote that I used to have memorized. I don't have the exact thing memorized now, but from Joanna Macy, that in this difficult time, it's precisely the time to call upon the story, to remember the story, because of the countless generations of pre-humans and humans that have struggled and suffered and sacrificed and yet precisely out of the chaos, out of the breakdowns, out of the destruction, that's what catalyzes creative transformation. And so that's when I hold that story in my heart, it reminds me to face the challenging times that we're now in, not from the place of oh shit, but from the place of all right, here we go. I mean, this is a time this is the title of this series. The future is calling us to greatness. So Joshua, if you could go into now, tell us about Generation Waking Up. Tell us about the programs. Like, give us a sense of sort of your work world now and your ministry.
Yeah, wonderful.
And for our viewers, we're recording this, and I'm in a very isolated place in Colorado. So I'll be turning off my video while Joshua speaks, just to save bandwidth. Okay, sorry, continue.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. So let me build from Joanna Macy. So Joanna has helped popularize a name for the story of our time, which she calls the Great Turning. And there's been many other voices helping bring that out. And the Great Turning is the shift from the industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. And Joanna says there's been three great revolutions, right? There was the agricultural revolution that totally changed the way humans live on the earth. And then came the industrial revolution, which we're still kind of living in the wake of. And right now we're living in a third great revolution, the Great Turning. So Generation Waking Up is it's an organization, but it's also a name and narrative for the story of our time. Like the Great Turning, like stories like Paul Hawkins' tale of blessed unrest, Generation Waking Up is helping tell the story of our time with a spotlight on today's young generation. There is a generation of young people coming of age on the planet right now that is being called forth to navigate this time of transition, and it's a generation that is perfectly equipped for it as well. We're the largest, most well-educated generation in all of history. We're the most multicultural and diverse. We're the most technologically savvy, right? Young people are disrupting society on all fronts through our use of technology. And the issues of our time, right? Climate change is probably the most defining issue of our generation, and it is rallying young people to become actively engaged like we've never seen before as well. So
that's great.
The climate movement of our time is probably the hottest, most heated movement, and so we see so much innovation happening within our social change sector. So Generation Waking Up is both about amplifying the story of our time and the positive stories of change, but it's also really about supporting young change makers and doing the work that they're doing. So we offer workshops. Our flagship program is called the Wake Up, where we go into schools and to youth conferences, and it's actually where we share the big story perspective. We give young people the context of big history. We help them understand who we are and where we are in the world today, and then we look at what has to change. And then we step into what do we do now? How can we take action? What's my role in this great turning? So our workshops kind of ignite young change makers, and then they step further on the journey with us by attending a leadership training. So we do deep transformative leadership trainings, weekends and week-long experiences where young people really get to connect in deeply with what is my purpose? What am I being called to do? Again, in the theme of being called to greatness, young people walk away from our trainings so lit up. You can just see the sparkle in their eye. And then we give them tools and resources to manifest their vision.
Yes.
And again, our work is not just about a particular issue area. It's really about supporting young people and finding their passion and their purpose. And then we help them achieve that. We connect them with the right people, with the right places, with the right resources. So we're part of a movement of change makers, both young and old. We partner and collaborate a lot with the youth and student movement out there, but we also work in deep partnership with people of all ages And even though our work is fundamentally about lifting up the millennial generation, young people in their teens and 20s, we truly believe that our world is calling the generations together to help navigate this moment together. So we do a lot of intergenerational convenings as well.
Fabulous. That's great. In fact, what you just shared, I find so inspiring, and I'm quite sure that many of the viewers and listeners in this series will as well. So if you're not completely flush with money and have all the financial support that you need, if somebody were watching this or listening to this and said, oh my God, this is fabulous what they're doing with young people and along these lines, how would somebody learn more about Generation Waking Up and donate or help support you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find us at generationwakingup.org, and our website has our full story. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, watch videos where you actually see testimonials of young people who've been through these trainings who are lit up and on fire, and we're friendly. Please, write us an email. You can contact me, Joshua, at generationwakingup.org. We love to be in conversation with folks who want to support this work.
That's great. Yeah, I had a wonderful conversation with Barbara a few weeks back, and I genuinely believe that the two of you and others on your staff and in your support are doing just some of the most important work on the planet, which is really helping to create, as I've heard you say before, sort of a new generation of superheroes, people who are stepping into their greatness by being of service, being a blessing, being a significant contribution to the world and to the future, and doing so without a sense that we have to perfect ourselves first. I mean, we're all, glorious, wonderful, generous assholes. I mean, we're all of it, and so much people have so much energy often to try to perfect themselves that once I get my act completely together and I'm all perfect, then I can be of service or be a blessing. And I'm finding that the universe needs our flaws. The universe needs our shortcomings. That the things that we judge about ourselves may not necessarily be something that hinders, but can actually be heart-opening in our connection with others, especially if we're vulnerable around our imperfections. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to mention is that my daughter, who Miriam Joy Dowd, she is now 23. And it's interesting because, you were talking about some of the characteristics of sort of the younger generation, the under 40 crowd or even under 30 crowd. And there's a sense of identification I know that Miriam has that I didn't have when I was her age. Her in-group is sort of her age cohorts and, somewhat younger and somewhat older, but globally. Now, she feels more of a sense of kinship and identity and in-group with other 20-somethings worldwide than she does, say, with just Americans or just Christians or just any other subgroup or even women. And I find that really encouraging because that's one of the things about the Epic of Evolution, the great story, the universe story, big history, that has given me hope, which is we keep finding ways of widening our circles of care, compassion, and commitment. And so I'm wondering if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think that's an expression of the global consciousness, right? That's really setting into global culture, right? Which young people are often the early adapters of, right? So again, this is true for people of all ages, but especially amongst the younger generations, there really is a sense of being part of a global community. And of course, technology and media is a huge part of this. The fact we're on Facebook and we're connected to young people on every continent, probably almost every country. We're having conversations and interactions with people from every culture. We start to just feel, that sense of being a part of a global family. Yeah. But it's also in the zeitgeist of our time. It's in the music, right? It's in the videos. It's in the images of our time, right? The Earth image that Joseph Campbell prophesied would, help to start unify the human family has really set in with this generation.
Yes.
It's just there. It's in the culture that we swim in, as a younger generation. We also we travel. And again, this is definitely more for young people on the planet who probably come from more privileged and developed societies. But increasingly, young people have been to another culture, have gotten on a plane and traveled somewhere, and that in itself also really kind of roots it in a really embodied way as well. So it's exciting. I love getting online every day and just seeing young people, in another part of the planet. To be honest, it doesn't matter what time of day too I get on Facebook. There's always something happening because somewhere in a different time zone,
Sure.
right? It's the peak of the day and excitement is happening.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I'd love to have you explore, I've forgotten to ask this question to a couple of other interviewers, but I always like to ask this when I remember to do so, which is what are some of the things that you see happening now that really give you hope that clearly is in the right direction. It's clearly what needs to happen for humanity to come into a mutually enhancing human-Earth relationship. So, first of all, what are you aware of now that's happening in the world, either organizations, whatever, at any level, that gives you hope and you would encourage for more of that? And then, sort of a separate question: what are some things that you really don't see being attended to or being done right now that you really feel need to be made a priority?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, there's so much happening, and I'm definitely my orientation is like the systems perspective and looking at every sector of society. And to be honest, I think almost any area I go into where I'm super excited about solutions and kind of breakthroughs that are happening, right next to it, though, I see like there's so much more needed. So let's just jump into it. I think I'm going to bring it into politics. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and even though I live in California on the West Coast, and I'm more connected with the environmental movement out here and the kind of spirituality and consciousness movement and the social justice movement out here. In D.C., I got to know really what's happening on the forefront of politics and kind of upgrading our democracy. Yes. And I think on almost any front, this is one of the most exciting ones, that millennials are just changing the game. Increasingly, young people today do not identify with a political party, and I'm speaking about the United States here. And increasingly, they're identifying really in a post-partisan way, and they're recognizing that we need to find a way to come together, to have honest conversations across our differences, and to find simple, workable solutions just to move things forward. And so young people also recognize that technology is going to aid this process. The way our democracy was built in the United States is outdated. We now have technology that can allow for conversation to flow online, that can allow for everybody to be informed and to kind of add their voice and their perspective using our online platforms. And so millennials are pushing this forward, bringing it into the White House, bringing it into Congress, bringing it into our local and state governments, helping open up government, making it more transpartisan, kind of breaking down the battle lines within our political system, and opening up a way for a common ground politics, a transformational politics to move forward. So I'm super excited about what's happening there.
That's great.
At the same time, though, the entrenched system is holding strong, and the power and the sway of big money within our political system that's what's dominating the conversation there. Yep. And there is not enough awareness around that. There's not enough people getting engaged on that front. And there are some people trying to make some heroic efforts, but it's really going to take large numbers of Americans waking up to the state of what's happening and helping put an end to it. But we need that vision of where the future of politics is headed, and I think that's where we need to look to the millennial generation. What else am I excited about? I think the whole sharing economy is one of the most exciting things of our times, and it's a convergence of new technologies that are helping kind of open things up and a whole new economy as well. So by the sharing economy, one example is just Uber and Lyft. I don't know if you're aware, Michael, of the fact that the whole taxi industry is being disruptive and pretty much is dying, because now any driver can sign up with an app on their phone to be a part of these companies called Uber or Lyft. And literally, I can walk out on the street and hit a button, and within minutes, a car will just pull up. Somebody with a smiling face will say, "Hey, welcome." I'll step right in. They'll take me where I need to go, and then I'll step out. There will be no exchange of money, and my credit card will be charged, and it's the most pleasant, easeful, graceful situation ever. It's cheaper than ever before. It's actually helping create jobs for more people than ever before, and it's changing the game. It's just one of many examples of kind of these new this what they call the new sharing economy, a way that it kind of levels the playing field, and everybody can kind of connect and find each other with so much more ease.
Wow. Well, no, I have not heard of that. It's coming to me as completely new information in this conversation. I mean, the one question that immediately comes to mind is, how is there quality control? How do you keep some psychopath just from signing up and then whatever?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the power of the wisdom of the crowd, because you can offer feedback right away, and the system's so fast, so everybody kind of reinforces each other. So just like you can go online, and if you want to find any service, you can find reviews from the community of users. It's the same with this system. So trust the wisdom of the crowd, and anyone who you can't trust, right away they get feedback, and the system takes that into account.
Wow.
And it supports those who are doing the right things, and it helps weed out those who aren't.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Well, one of my favorite authors, in fact, my favorite author in the world, is John Michael Greer. And he talks about, peak oil and climate and the deindustrial future. And many people think that he's pessimistic. He's actually not. He's brilliant in terms of his understanding of history, that, all empires rise and contract. And societies rise and contract, usually because of their relationship or lack of right relationship to ecological limits, to the realities of the air, water, soil, life, and resources of the planet. And this sharing economy, as you're describing it, sounds almost exactly where. It's not a surprise to me that so many young people, like my daughter, are really drawn to a lot of this. I'll be interviewing Charles Eisenstein here shortly as well. But rethinking economics, rethinking the exchange of energy, the exchange of gifts, the exchange of services, of goods, from a sort of post, I don't even know what to call it really, but from a more ecological sharing place, just feels really healthy. It feels really vital and timely as well.
Yeah, and it's happening at all levels. Young people on college campuses are kind of creating their own little internal currencies there, where they can kind of, circumnavigate the more common currencies. And then, of course, Bitcoin is all the rage, and it really mostly, millennials are adopting it early because they recognize that.
Yeah.
This is where the future is headed.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you mentioned earlier on, Joshua, the phrase communities of healing and communities of transformation. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share who are some of the individuals, authors, movements, whatever, that you found particularly helpful or inspiring for yourself and those in terms of individuals and communities of healing and transformation.
Yeah. Well, that's hard to know where to start. I mean, I think we already named Joanna Macy and Joanna's work. Joanna's a great elder of our time, and has a body of work called The Work That Reconnects. And it's been really significant for the work of Generation Waking Up, and also a lot of young people. We've brought a lot of young people into Joanna's work. And Joanna's also really started to work with young people of color as well, and to adapt that work to bring it more into low-income urban parts of our cities
That's
and
great.
communities. So that's phenomenal. And then on the edges of society, there are these communities of healing and transformation that people who are trying to create the new world today, and many of them are, and so there's retreat centers and farms and eco villages, places where people are living close to the earth, finding a rich work-life balance, having lots of time for personal growth and reflection and healing, while also still contributing in significant ways. Places where people are living together very intentionally, and communicating with one another in very clear and conscious and loving ways, eating healthy food, celebrating and savoring life, which
Yeah, amen.
is lost so much. We're tomorrow is the 4th of July holiday here in the United States, and for me personally, it saddens me the type of celebration. While yes, there's a deep honoring of the story of this great nation. There's also just there's a lot of junk food consumed. There's a lot of alcohol consumed. There's a deep missing from my own experience, and so there are these communities of deep culture and celebration that I often find myself to. And then of course there are our religious and spiritual traditions and communities. And I'm someone who really encourages folks to explore and to go and connect and expose yourself to different faith communities and different spiritual traditions.
Yes.
And those are the places of transformation. And when you walk in there, even if it's not your direct practice or culture, there's often wisdom and healing there for you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, nature itself, for me and for you as well, Michael. I know you just acknowledged you were just out hiking with Connie. Nature continues to be, one of my great sources of healing and transformation, and just a deep walk alone in the woods, a hike to the top of a hill or a mountain, an hour sitting quietly with the sunset, letting life speak to me and work itself in me. Those are the places of healing that I'm going to.
Amen.
There's tremendous people, leaders, teachers, who are also healers and rising up, but that list is probably too long for me to go into right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate that. One of the books that I'm just reading right now, The Impossible Will Take a Little While by Paul Loeb, and it's a story of just amazing stories of perseverance and hope in troubling times. I recommend that to everybody watching this or listening to this. Well, Joshua, I know you need to go to another meeting here in a little bit, but I want to ask a question that's sort of off the wall. Connie has invited me to ask it to all the participants, and it's been really fun to hear the responses. And it's this basically, that if you could invite 3 people from any time in history to either a dinner party where you and those 3 people are all together, all 4 of you, or a one-on-one, like where you go off and, have a cup of coffee or a beer or, a meal with one person at a time. But if you were to be able to have some quality interaction over a meal or a drink with any 3 people in history, who would those be and why?
Yeah, well, the first 3 come to mind are they're all men, and they're all kind of they all are archetypal souls that I feel very connected to, and so they would be Fyodor Dostoevsky, Hermann Hesse, and Jack Kerouac. And these are 3 men who their books really helped save me in my my period of darkness and struggle and trying to find my way. And I think these were men who had their own dark nights of the soul and really struggled with making peace with existence. And, in truth, I'd say even the Buddha, Siddhartha, right? This is another archetypal soul who struggled with the suffering and then found his way to the light. But I would so savor sitting down and having a conversation with these men and kind of commiserating, touching into the sweet pathos of existence, while also still kind of stoking that triumphant spirit in each of us that somehow finds the way to persevere, and to make meaning out of it all, and to sublimate it through writing and prose and storytelling. So that's deeply revealing of who I am, and keeping in mind my own story as someone who found his way through a really deep, dark night of the soul.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And the last question I'd like to ask is sort of in two parts. If it's some young person, say, 17, 18, 20, 21-year-old, is just really in despair about the world and about the challenges ahead, what would you say to that young person? And then some person in their, say late 50s or 60s, who is wanting to, in some way, they've just recently retired, so they don't have to do that work, and they want to give their life and their life energy in the right direction. So, what piece of coaching or advice would you give those somebody at either end of that spectrum?
Yeah, well, for the young person who's really struggling with the gravity of these times, I would just invite you to remember that that's only part of the story, but it's a real part of the story, and it really is hard to be young and alive right now. But be with it and let it out, feel it. Take your journal out and write dark poetry. Let your feelings out. Go out into the woods and scream your soul out. Talk with others and share the pain of your struggle. But also don't forget that's only part of the story, and make sure you're also paying attention to the other part of the story, because there is so much hope, there's so much possibility, there are so many inspiring young people who are making a difference in our time. And for those of you who are in the later chapters of life and looking to get involved and to support young people, just don't be shy, don't be afraid, don't feel like, oh, I'm too old and I'm too different, I can't connect with this young person. Be authentic, go and share your story. Make sure you listen too. That's important. I think sometimes even when we're nervous, sometimes we go into kind of speaking at mode and we want to teach, or we feel uncomfortable. But also make sure to share your story too. I also see adults who kind of step back and they're afraid to kind of bring their own wisdom and truth. And so it's about being co-mentors, right? It's about co-learning. There's something powerful and magical that can come to life between a younger and an older, or a younger and an elder, and it's so needed. That medicine, the synergy that comes to life between us is so important for these times as well.
Wow, fabulous. Boy, I can't think of a better note to end on. Any last thing you'd like to say, or you've already mentioned Generation Waking Up in terms of the website. Any final thoughts, or just where people can go to learn more about your work?
Yeah, generationwakingup.org, and I'll just share. I'm finally completing a book about our work that really is telling the story of young people today and all of these changes. So stay tuned for that. It's titled Generation Waking Up, and I'm excited to share that with the world, because it really does capture the greatness of today's young generation within the greatness of our times.
That's awesome. Well, if you need any suggestions for a possible literary agent, let me know, because I have somebody in mind who is really, really a blessing to me and to many others. So, Well, Joshua, thank you so much for being part of this. I just have loved this conversation. It's great to reconnect with you, just heart to heart, and just a deep bow of gratitude to you and to your work.
Thank you, Michael. Much love to you and Connie as you journey onward. Thank you for your call to greatness.
Cool. Thank you too, brother.
All right.
Blessings. Bye bye.